I am a big fan of The Chosen. You're a producer on The Chosen. Now, my guess is most of our listeners have probably checked out The Chosen, maybe watched it, have heard of it. But could you just briefly explain to us what is The Chosen?
Yeah, you'd be surprised how many people haven't seen The Chosen yet. So those that haven't seen The Chosen, it's the first multi-season series about the life of Jesus Christ, his ministry. It really digs deep on those that he called to start his ministry and those that followed him, the disciples. And it goes through kind of where they were at in their life and the whole character arc of them discovering who Jesus is, the Messiah, and how their lives have literally been transformed in good and even in bad ways. So,
Yeah, no, what I love about it, well, there's two things. Thing number one, it's artful. You know, like excluding Mel Gibson's The Passion, most of kind of Christian art around Jesus is kind of cheesy, or it was like made in the 70s. And why are we still watching this? And so
right.
I am curious to ask. I'll go to my second favorite thing, but why has it been so important for your team to make this an artful show?
Well, I think it's more coming back to my partner, the writer director Dallas Jenkins, his quest of understanding humanity. Like he is a student of humanity, and he loves people, and like people have different issues at different times. And so I think that the secret of The Chosen, it's relatable. And that's where the artful comes into it. Cause it's like, when you're talking like kind of Passion of the Christ, Mel Gibson, that was pretty brutal. Like
That's
when you look at
intense.
it, he did the whole brutality thing, but yet there was these moments of that you never saw before, the moments of dialogue between Jesus and his mom, and things that you're like, oh my gosh, okay, this can be. And we wanted to take it to the level of really having it be relatable, that not every disciple was the same, and give a little bit of context and background to what it could have been like, what was plausible at that time when Jesus actually started his ministry.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually the second thing I love about it is how human it is. We
Yeah,
today are so used to literature that it's psychological in nature, So
right.
when you meet a character, you get to get a description of what they look like, and then you get a kind of view into what's happening inside their head. Whereas ancient literature, and especially the Bible, has a lot of reading between the lines. Like it's the artfulness of the story. They do
Oh
a lot
yeah,
of showing, not a lot of telling. And so sometimes I think, especially if you grow up in this stuff, you lose the humanity behind these characters. And so what I love is that, you guys have said, look, this isn't the Bible, but you've infused some
right,
human
right.
elements into it. What are some of your favorite human elements that you've added into the biblical stories?
No, I love the question, and I want to give it some context, because when we first was like kicking around the idea, and we even did the first 4 episodes of season 1, they're like, Peter would have never done that. I'm like, really? like, are you sure? Like
Like
people
what
like
wouldn't he have
had
done?
this
Like the fist fighting thing? Like that's how you meet
yeah,
Peter? He's
the
like out
whole
there
preconceived
brawling.
idea of who Peter is, right? So everyone has their own perception. So the thing that I love about The Chosen, and this will answer the question, is the plausibility. So we do know for a fact that Peter lived in Capernaum. He had a brother named Andrew. He had a
Hmm.
mother-in-law, so we know that he was married. Okay, that's what we do know. We also know that the publican that was in the same town was Matthew. So Peter was a business owner. He had boats. He had a fleet of boats. James and John, son of Zebedee, lived in the same town, and we know for a fact that they had interaction with Matthew. Okay, that happened. Now, two, how would you respond to someone that is your like it is a Jew, okay, and betrayed the people and go work and collect taxes for Rome? How would you actually treat them? Now, being close to tax time right now, I am not too happy paying taxes. I'll be honest with you. It's just like there's a lot of like frustration of like, man, I'm just trying to get ahead, and they take every dime, So I think at the end of the day, that's human interaction. And so what I love is it plausible that Peter, being a hothead, because that's kind of what I read into the Bible, would have some type of a little bit of a rub with someone that's a betrayer of the Jews. And so like, I love that context is we got to take a little bit more creative liberty to set stage to the epic moments of the Bible. So it's like, what is the backstory? What is the plausible backstory? Now, we don't know the way that it is, right? But we know, hey, is this plausible? Yeah, it could be. And what I do love and this is what I like, I'm just so passionate about it, is when I was reading the scripts for the first time. Like I'm a Peter guy. There's a lot that we have in common. Like I'm very impulsive. I'm really aggressive, and all these things. And so I'm like, I love Peter. But I'll tell you what, Matthew grabbed my heart, like literally just grabbed my heart from episode 1. And I'm like, oh, just because the way that we have his character is he's on spectrum. And if you ever read the book of Matthew, I mean, he has to have everything in a perfect order. It has to be in its perfect place. And so, for me, I just yearned for him because I could see how he's misunderstood and how he didn't even understand the things that were going around from him. And then the whole Shabbat scene in episode 2, it crushed me. That crushed me as a follower of Jesus, going, man, how often am I judgmental of the person that's just walking down the street, and how I need to take a step back, because we don't know what they're going through until we walk through their steps. And so kind of walk their path. And that's what I love about The Chosen, is we get to show these character journeys of where people are at and what the times are like. And if you look at what was happening in first century, Judea at the time, and what's happening now, there's a lot of similarities. You have, a very, very lot of oppression that's going on. You have huge taxation. There's a lot of people that didn't have the means to even provide, so they were just living off of just the next meal. And then 2, when Jesus started his ministry, there's a lot of hatred towards the people of Samaria, because there's like, those are the enemies, and that's where Jesus actually started his ministry. And so there's a lot of bigotry, hatred, racism, all that kind of all coming together. And I'm like, man, if there's ever a time in the world that the stories that Jesus taught, the greatest story ever told, needs to happen, is now, because they're so paralleled of why that time needed the Messiah and how we need the Messiah today.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you hit the nail on the head. There are so many questions, so many problems that we're facing in our cultural moment. The Bible has answers to it, but because we've almost anesthetized it, we've turned it into this superhuman story. We've lost how it speaks into our moment. And I love the creative choices your team has made. I've heard people critique it and say, well, now people are going to start imagining, Jesus in their head as the Jesus on The Chosen, or like the Peter they read about as a Peter on The Chosen, or they're going to think that things that happen in The Chosen are things that actually happened in the Bible. And I always think that's a little bit silly, because I'm like, hey, if you don't know what's happening in the Gospels and you're adding in things from The Chosen, that's not their fault. That's your fault. like at the end of the day, you don't know your Bible, and that's okay. But that's
I would agree 100%. And I think this is a really big point. Is like, we want 1 billion people to see an authentic Jesus. Now, the authentic Jesus that we're portraying is a Jesus that had a mom. He had personal human relationships. Mm-hmm. He had disciples. He had one-on-one relationships with that. And I think sometimes, I know I felt in this trap growing up. It was just like, I only see the deity side, but I never really explored the humanity side. And I'll be honest with you, that's what I needed. I needed to understand the humanity side of Jesus. And if The Chosen can just put a little color into that, I think it's going to give a lot more clarity on what we actually need to read in the Bible. I don't think that we'll replace it. I think that's something that like, we don't even want that. We just want to steer people to the source. And ultimately, when they pull open the scriptures and they start deep diving into what he taught, they can have a little bit more understanding. Was, hey, he's not distant. He's actually right here. He's right here waiting for us. He has his arms open, and I think he's a lot more approachable than what we allow him to be. And I think that's the whole essence of the show, is knowing, hey, there is the humanity side, there is the deity side, and he had that balance perfectly. He knew exactly what we needed and what the disciples needed at the right time and in the right way. And we just don't necessarily, I don't think our minds can comprehend that. We're trying our best to do it in a way that can showcase that.
Absolutely. I know a lot of people who have told me that this show has helped reinvigorate their faith for the reasons you just said. It rehumanized Jesus. It brought them into these real life living stories, and that's allowed them to read their Bible as what they've always been, real life
Yep.
living stories. I'm curious, what stories have you heard? Because there have to be people who are watching this who are atheists, who are agnostics. Like, what are some of the coolest stories you've heard of people responding to this show in interesting ways?
Well, Patrick, how much time do you got? Because every day, we're getting
Tell me your
hundreds
favorites.
of impactful stories. No, I mean, it's hard to choose. It's like picking your best child. It's like, how do you do that? You know? But like, I think the constant theme was this, and I think this is one where I was giving Dallas some of my concerns was when I read the first episode script and I go, I turned to him, I'm like, because I'm not the writer, right? I'm just the marketer. I just try to push that out to it. You know, I'm running the company, whatever. But I'm like, I turned to him, I'm like, dude, this is like dark. Like, do we really want to start the show like this? And this is what he said. He goes, yes. He goes, we do, because this episode is pretty much what The Chosen is. It's about hardship. And then when they meet the Messiah, when they meet Jesus, the transformational element of redemption. He goes, that is The Chosen. And yet Jesus was only in there for like 4 minutes, but it's just that moment of, oh my gosh, that redemption moment. And that journey. And why I use that as an example, because you had a suicidal woman that was demon possessed, that had all this stuff happening to her because of trauma, whether it's PTSD from, you know, the Romans or from losing her dad or whatever that is, right? She was dealing with a lot. And that was the moment that Jesus went into a bar and started the process of redeeming her. And I love that because I can't tell you how many people have reached out and says, I am exactly like what Lilith was and who became Mary. It's like, that's my story. You know, I was suicidal. I was just moments away of really taking my life. And I had this ad, or I saw a video, or someone shared a text message to go watch the app. And then that was my story, and I was hooked, and I knew there's so much more. And so I would say that would probably be the most important for me because of how raw that is, but also how many lives that are being impacted because they can relate. You know, they can relate to maybe, you know, where they're at with the pressures of the world, and see that there's still someone there that knows exactly what we need and knows exactly the timing and is just waiting to pull us into his life, into his realm.
I love hearing these stories. To change the focus for a second, you said that you're the marketing guy, and I don't know if I could say you guys have gotten into marketing trouble. I think it's one of the most amazing marketing campaigns I've ever seen. Is this campaign you guys started called "The Chosen Sucks," SUX, The Chosen Sucks, and you guys put up billboards where they looked like they'd been vandalized with people saying that The Chosen sucks. You created these YouTube videos and a website with this, you know, demon trying to train his demon underlings to get people to stop watching The Chosen. My favorite part, by the way, is when Satan's writing on the chalkboard and he's like, the chalk sounds like scratching nails, and he picks up the eraser and he goes and he wipes with the eraser. And it sounds like Nickelback, and he wipes and you get this Nickelback sound coming. I'm like, oh, this is so good. And that DMV is lower than the hell. Anyways, no. So let me ask, why did you guys do this campaign? Why The Chosen sucks? I mean, you didn't need more press. I mean, people are talking about it, but it seems like there's a point behind this one.
Yeah. Very good question. So just to give some context. So myself and Jeffrey Harmon, who is one of the founders at Angel Studios, we were the executive producers on the Squatty Potty Pooping Unicorn ad. It's like the most viral video ad of all time. And so
that's kind of how you made your name, right?
Exactly. It's like we got to do it. But
I have a Squatty Potty, by the way. I'm really glad you made that ad. It's helped my life.
It's helped my life too, because the product actually works. But
it does.
But besides the point, getting off the crappy stuff, I think that the essence is sometimes when you approach people you're in a vacuum chamber, realistically, we haven't even hit market penetration for just Christians in the U.S. Like we're not even remotely close. Like in fact, I was in Chick-fil-A just the other day, and okay, Chick-fil-A is a good place, and I was in Texas in Chick-fil-A, and the guy didn't even know who the Chosen was, and he's like
What?
super
Hold on.
engaged.
Let's rewind. Someone at Chick-fil-A didn't know what the Chosen was?
Exactly.
My mind is blown.
That's my whole point. Is like we there's a lot of people that don't even know it. Because they're in their own little bubble. Okay. And so marketing's all about connecting people where they're at and pulling them in to, understand what your brand is and so on. I can tell you from day one, the biggest generation that I'm the most concerned with, and the reason why I spent the bulk of my career on YouTube was helping this up and coming generation have moments of light in their life, because like there's different influencers on YouTube that are leading them down a path of destruction, of doing things that are not appropriate, and I don't think that they're even they're leading them down to becoming numb to the things that are important. And so like I was on a quest for that light, and so knowing who this Generation Z is, knowing what makes them tick, we gotta think differently. We gotta approach this differently. And one of the brilliance of this campaign is that right now, that generation, they're looking to activate. They really want to activate. They're very evangelistic. Once they figure out what they're about, they just get behind and they start movements. Okay, so like we want that generation. We want the generation to come on and start a movement for Jesus. And so how do you get their attention? Well, the best way to get their attention is to cancel the Chosen. And who's best to cancel the Chosen? The devil. like it just doesn't get much better than that. So it grabs their attention, pulls them in. So let me give you part 2 of the Chick-fil-A story. It was the launch of the campaign, and I was with a team member that hadn't seen the campaign, and I just pulled out my phone, because that's what I do. I literally watch YouTube videos and everything on my phone. I pull it out, turn the volume up, put it right there, and it was the joining booth. And the dad stops, says, "Hey, what do you guys do?" And I stopped the video, and I says, "Oh," because he saw us pray and whatever. I says, "Oh, we work on a TV show called The Chosen." He goes, "What's that?" And I explained what The Chosen is. And he goes, "Oh, I haven't even heard of it." And I go, "Well, how active are you, in your congregation? Because I'm assuming you're active." He goes, "Oh yeah. I like two or three times a week we're actually leading a Bible group and all this other stuff." And I says, "You really haven't heard about The Chosen?" He goes, "I have no idea." And so anyway, he was just having dinner with his son, who's Gen Z. And I hit play again. His son gets up, goes around and watches the ad, and he goes, "Oh my gosh, this is so good." And then he starts to laugh and whatever. Dad downloads the app, okay, because it was the son, it piqued his curiosity. We spent a little bit of time talking about what The Chosen is, and he literally told me, my 21-year-old and 17-year-old are so disconnected from who Jesus really is. I says, "Well, I'd encourage you to, get The Chosen, because this show is for them, and it's also for you." And anyway, he binge watched the show, because we binged Jesus with The Chosen, and he was able to get 3 episodes, and he sent me a text message that said, "Dude, this is amazing. This is exactly what we need." All that. And it all came from a conversation from a very disruptive ad, because like what he said, and I didn't tell you this, he goes, "It's not very smart doing a devil campaign in the Bible Belt, because it's not going to work very well." I'm like, "Well, it worked for your kid." So
Well, I love that. I love how disruptive it is. I mean, it's like screw tape letters. I mean, evangelicals should have a category for this, but we also kind of love to be what we're against, not what we're for. And that's a lot of what you're going to see in Texas. Now, hey, see, here was my question, though. One second. Sorry, we didn't have our things turned off, even though we told you to. Here, I'll say that again. But here was one of my questions. I know that there has been controversy around The Chosen. And so I didn't see it even so much as, hey, let's reach Gen Z. I saw it as, hey, we're kind of picking on the people who are out there saying that The Chosen sucks. And we're making fun of, like, why would you say that this thing sucks? And was that part of the heart, the impetus behind it?
Yeah, I would more say that there's a preconceived idea that Christian media is bad. And so a lot of people over the course of the last 4.5 years is like, no, like all Christian media is bad. Well, no, not necessarily. Like there are a lot of bad, cheesy content, right? But The Chosen is different. and we want to get them that. So that, like, it's just more reverse psychology marketing is one of the most effective out there, and it just works. I mean, even Chick-fil-A is doing it. Is having cows writing "Eat More Chicken," on their billboards. It's like when you see that, there is just like that trigger for human emotion to say, well, why shouldn't I watch it? Or why does it suck? And so there's that curiosity factor that they'll actually go into the content.
Yeah, yeah. So how have you been responding? Because one of the major controversies that's come and kind of circled around The Chosen has been the fact that on this project, leading this project, you have an evangelical Dallas Jenkins, you have a Mormon who's you have people from Catholic backgrounds involved in the project, Messianic Jewish backgrounds involved in the project, and people are saying, hey, we can't talk about Jesus with a Mormon. We can't do a show about Jesus as an evangelical with a Catholic or with a Messianic Jew. Right. And so I'm just curious for you. I mean, how are you leaning into that? How are you responding to that critique?
Well, I want to make it clear that the creative control of the content is Dallas Jenkins, who was a Bible major at school, film and Bible major, right? And like, he's obsessed of getting it right. And he surrounds himself by people, not myself, but people like Dr. Huffman, that gives him a lot of clarity of what it would have been like during that time. He also brings in Rabbi Jason, who's a Messianic Jew. It's like, what is the cultural significance of things? And wants to get a lot of clarity, but he literally has the ultimate voice for The Chosen of what's being written. I don't even speak into it, nor anyone outside of the writers really do. It's just more, are we accurate? And he takes that approach. Now, that being said, being involved with the project, yes, we even have people that don't even believe in a God that are working on the project. But that doesn't take away from the project itself. It's kind of like, the way I look at it is like getting the Bible that we read, right? Like, how many hands did that pass, and were they all believers? Were they all the believers for you? Like, were they all evangelical believers? Well, no. And did you have other people involved? Does that take away from the Bible itself? Now, I'm not here to compare The Chosen to the Bible, because like literally we're a TV show. Like, it's like nothing. The Bible is the Bible, and the Bible is where we need to go. But the whole purpose of it is there's a lot of hands that touch the thing, even for marketing and everything, that go to it, and yet they don't have problems with that. I think that that people are super sensitive to the content, and they're like, hey, this is ours, not yours. But Jesus came for everyone, and what I love, and I'll say this from my core, is when Jesus started his ministry, we can learn from that as his followers. Okay, where did he start it? Who did he actually say it to first, that he was the Messiah? Who did he proclaim that to? Okay, let's look at that. Okay, it was a woman. Okay, when you take the class of people, you had animals, women, right there. Okay, they weren't even higher up in hierarchy at all. Okay, they're very, very lower class citizens in that realm. She was a Samaritan, so the enemies of the Jews. Okay, so they had thousands of years of conflict, and yet this is where he was actually proclaiming his divinity, right? And then also, she was a woman that wasn't even in the same category of all women there. She was kind of cast out. She'd been married 5 times, kind of pushed off aside, and she was even looked down upon even at that moment. And so what that teaches me is Jesus came for so much more than just a religion. He came for the world, and the world deserves to see what he taught. And then when he started his ministry and when he impacted the people in Samaria, like, that really disrupted the people that were his disciples, right? It had to cause some conflict. We kind of show what could have been plausible, but like, I even thinking, okay, you're going to your enemies first, and this is where we're starting our ministry, like, wait, whoa, Jesus. But reality is he came for everyone. And for me, like, we've made it quite clear, Dallas is going to lead the creative and the writing and all this other stuff, but we're going to get this out to 1 billion people. We're going to get it out, and we're going to flood the earth with this, getting it to all corners in different languages, so people can know an authentic Jesus. And that's what I care about.
Yeah, no, I was going to joke in the middle of that I'm very careful with my Bibles. I go to the paper mills and make sure that everybody who's handling the paper follows Jesus. Otherwise, it's an unholy Bible, you know. So we got to go
Well,
back to basics. So that's like part of it. So I see part of this, and it's just ridiculous to me. You know, I actually think there's beauty in the fact that there's actors who aren't Christians who are on
yep.
the show, right? And I'm curious. I mean, I wonder how this is going to change their lives, their perception of Jesus. I mean, have you heard stories from them about, hey, this is making me think differently?
Yeah, so I don't like to speak for the actors because actors, you'd have to ask them
Yeah.
on that. I do know that both the cast and crew, and I'll just do this more as a blanket response, have been impacted in one way or another, and there have been a lot of people that have found Jesus along the way, and I think the essence is this story is much more than just a TV show from my perspective. It's literally helping people understand who Jesus is, and it leads them to the source. I want to share something with you. We haven't really made this public yet, so I'll leave it here. I
Yeah.
guess we're going public here now.
Yeah.
But I had this weird idea a couple years ago. I'm like, what happens if when Gen Z sees this, right? Like, what would happen if we got maybe 9 or 10 Gen Zers, put them in a room and have them binge watch the show? What would be the transformational moments in their lives? Would they reposition some thoughts? Where would they go? And what's amazing is out of 9, and we're getting ready, we've shown this documentary a little bit at colleges, and we're just getting ready to kind of launch this out. But it literally shows people reprocessing their thoughts and really seeing Jesus for who he is. And there's a couple beautiful moments in there. One of redemption that is just unbelievable. Of when someone felt that Jesus was approachable where they thought that he never was, and seeing the next steps of what they do and where they go for the ultimate source, because it's not the chosen, I can tell you that, but it led them to the source.
Yeah, you're a guidepost. You're not the destination. You're pointing them away on the journey. Now, if I can take the alternative side and be empathetic to maybe your critics for a second, even though I probably disagree with them, I just made it clear. What I can imagine someone saying, their concern would be, look, Jesus isn't just another character or historical figure, right? He is the creator of the universe. He's the most important person who's ever lived. He's the guide for our lives. And so the reason why I'm upset that a project like The Chosen would have atheists and agnostics, why it would have, Mormons and Messianic Jews and all these different people, whichever camp you're coming from, right, is because when that person gets involved, they're going to fundamentally alter the message that is the most important message on earth. I mean, even for you and me, right? Like I guess I'm kind of an evangelical. I don't know what I like to call myself. I'm an evan something, and you're Mormon, and we have differences in our belief that I would say are probably pretty significant. And so I can imagine someone in my camp saying, "Hey, how can you work with them?" And by the way, the other way around, that someone in your camp would say, "Hey, how could you be working with these evangelicals who don't agree with what we say on these issues?" So how are you thinking through that? How are you processing through that?
Well, I like to get to the source of it, is put theology aside, and we're just talking about the stories of Jesus. That's what we're doing. Like, we're literally focusing in on what's in the Bible. And you can see the moments, like when Peter is called. It's like I had so many people that were non-religious, religious, from different faith backgrounds. Says, was that really in the Bible? I'm like, go find out. There it is. And they're like pleasantly surprised. Oh my gosh, it's actually in there. I'm like, you need to read the Bible a little bit more, because yes, it's been in there the whole time. But I think the essence is, who is the guardian of the content, and that's Dallas. And so it is his perspective. Will I agree 100% on everything of what he does and how he approaches it? I don't know. I have up to this point, and what happens when there's a disagreement? Well, there is no disagreement, because he's the content creator. I'm not. He gets to create whatever he wants from that. So I can tell you this, and this is something that he feels weight with, of making sure that he gets it right. He needs to make sure that we had a little bit of delay with season 3. It was actually a pretty big delay. One of the reasons was supply chains and getting things built and all this other stuff. It's just been really hard. to go from there. But I'll be honest with you, everything stopped for The Chosen because the scripts weren't right. Dallas just didn't feel good with it, with the direction that he was going, and they rewrote and rewrote and rewrote, and so like it created a ripple effect, of course. But he wants to get this right, and so regardless of who's working on it or why, we are going to tell the stories of Jesus from the perspective of Dallas and the writers, and we're going to try to be as accurate and plausible as possible. But do you know what? You might not agree with everything that's going on. There's a lot of people that really had issue with another controversy of Jesus preparing for the Sermon on the Mount. Like they who he's God. He just did, and and so there's even people that find fault there. But all we're doing is we're trying to do our very best not to mess it up, and it all comes with Dallas. Like he's just making sure that he takes this prayerfully. He does a lot of consult with his wife, who's just super amazing, super connected to God, and gives a lot of clarity to the scripts. And then two, the scripts really translate into what you see on screen. So there's not much variation from that.
Yeah. I love that people got upset over Jesus preparing. What in the world is more holy about like just coming up and extemporaneously speaking as versus doing your hard work? Like the dude was a carpenter. He knew how to work. He knew how to prepare. So that's interesting.
Could I say something? Because I think that was one of the most impactful moments for me. Like I can't even tell you how many times I read the Beatitudes, and I read Sermon on the Mount. I couldn't even tell you how many times, right? But when I read the script, it just crushed me because it realized, because like in that he was thinking a very specific, in The Chosen, not necessarily the Bible, but what we thought is plausible is he was thinking about his disciples, of how diverse they were and why they were needed, and all of them were needed, and the traits that they actually brought to the ministry are traits that will lead us to him, and so it's just like, oh, here's the collective traits. And so I honestly, like I could not contain myself, because I'm like, hey, God knows us, and he knows what he needs, and he calls imperfect people for his ministry, right? And they had certain qualities that were needed as a whole, as a collective, for his church. And I'm like, how beautiful is that? Like, how beautiful is that? Because even seeing someone's flaws, we're really quick to see people's flaws, but seeing how he sees us is where we need to have a lot of clarity. And I think The Chosen helps people a little bit go on that path, that journey to seeing, how God sees them as well.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it goes back to that humanizing aspect. Look, I think you guys are going to continue to deal with these controversies. I think you'll continue to face them. And I think that there's valid concerns. You said, hey, let's put theology aside and let's talk about the stories. And I look at that, I'm like, well, hold on. The Bible does its theology and story. So it's not that simple to say, hey, over on the side over here, we get our ideas. And over
it's more about how you interpret it, though. That's the difference between the story. Like, we want you to interpret it how you want, right? And so you can interpret any way that you want. And that's how you would look at a piece of content. But I think the essence is, why did Jesus turn water into wine? Like, we're not getting into the theology of how it happened. Like, it just happened, right? Yeah. Like, there's but
I think in the answer to that question, there is an interpretation and there is a theology, right? To answer the question, why did he do it, is for me to tell you something true about God and the nature of Jesus, which is what theology is. And so The Chosen is an interpretation.
And that's what we want. We want you to be able to go and explain that, right? Mm-hmm. But was that explained exactly into that moment? Well, no, it wasn't. It did go back into what was happening in the Bible in this first recorded miracle, and we gave plausible backstory of why that was important. But the theology is what we perceive, right? And then too, it creates these moments that you can have these discussions of really deep diving into that aspect of it. So
and I think what you said is also just really fair. You said, look, let's just be really clear here. Dallas is the kind of creative director and the creative vision. And so he's going to be the person who's making the final calls and things. And what I like about that is that it's honest, right? To people who aren't evangelicals, who love the show and they know there's an evangelical guy running it, well, it's just honest to say, look, that's who's running it. Dallas is the guy behind it. That's his background. Dallas is the son of a guy who wrote, the Left Behind series and was a part of that. And there's a lot of stuff in that series, me personally, I think is like kind of nonsense. I don't agree with any of it at all. So am I going to stop listening to The Chosen or watching The Chosen because he's the son of this dude who I disagree with on some things? Well, no, of course not. And are there going to be things on The Chosen that I disagree with? Sure, there's going to be. Everybody's going to have those moments with it. But like we just said, it's an interpretation of what happened. And just by engaging with it, I hope it does press people more deeply into the Bible. And I hope it does help people read their Bible with more human characters. And I think that's one of the beauties of this show. And I know it's changing people's life, which is why I like it.
Do you feel politically homeless?
Join the club.
Both parties are becoming more tribal and neither fully represent the values of Jesus. Christians need a path forward that leaves partisanship behind.
That's why we wrote Truth Over Tribe, pledging allegiance to the lamb, not the donkey or the elephant. Together, we can end tribalism.
Pre-order the book on Amazon and let's start a movement.